I am Noah Bennett, 36, a freelance designer, husband to Maya, and dad to a 7-year-old named Lily who thinks our lemon tree smiles at her. We moved to Maple Court because I wanted a quieter life, the kind that sounds like sprinklers at dawn and basketballs on driveway concrete, not car horns and ambulance sirens. The split level we bought had a porch light that felt friendly and a mailbox that had worked hard for years. It looked like a place where you could learn your neighbors' names and mean it when you said hello. On our first evening, a man crossed the street with a bright smile and a handshake that felt like a performance. "Greg Whitmore," he said, and then, without quite asking, told us Maple Court was the best little corner of America. Behind him stood a catalog-perfect house, flagpole, trimmed hedges, white columns, and a wooden sign on the porch that said "Blessed" in tidy letters. His wife, Kim, waved and disappeared in the same motion. Their teenage son, Chase, hovered in the doorway and let his attention slide back to his phone. We said the polite things that people say on good days. I wanted to believe him, because it is easier to start with trust and adjust later than to start with suspicion and be right. The first week felt like a montage. We hung curtains and praised the light from 3 different windows. Lily wrapped a friendship bracelet around a low branch and announced that the lemon tree's name was Sunny. Greg sent me the HOA handbook with a thumbs-up emoji and a sentence that sounded helpful if you didn't listen too hard. Rules keep the neighborhood beautiful. I thanked him and told myself that rules were just fences for lawn furniture, not for people. The first complaint was almost kind. An email from the HOA president, Ruth Delgado, reminded us that trash bins should not be visible from the street. We were still moving in and had left them out for a day. I apologized and fixed it. Ruth replied with a warm welcome, then added, "A small postscript that someone mentioned our porch light stayed on past midnight. It was not a violation," she said, "just a note about our energy bill." The word "someone" stayed with me longer than the advice. Small things began to multiply. A handwritten note under Maya's wiper suggested we tidy our lawn edges because first impressions matter. A drone drifted over our fence one Saturday, hovered above our patio table as if it had an opinion, then backed away when I called toward the Whitmore yard and asked politely for it to stay on their side. A plastic bag of dog waste was tucked under our mailbox flag 2 mornings in a row, as neat as a scheduled delivery. A key scratch appeared on the driver's side of my car. It was not deep, but it was long and careful. When Lily left her scooter, under the lemon tree while we ran inside, the HOA received an anonymous message about toys left visible in front yard. We brought the scooter in and put the message in a folder. 2 weeks after we moved in, a police cruiser rolled to a quiet stop in front of our house. The officer, Jenna Park, was calm and respectful as she explained that someone had made an anonymous welfare call about a child crying. She stepped inside, took in the refrigerator covered with drawings and the basket of shoes by the door, and met Lily, who was watching a cartoon with strawberry on her chin. Maya, who was a pediatric nurse, gave a brief explanation about an earache the night before, and Officer Park nodded in that steady way people do when they see a home that is messy because it is lived in, not because it is unsafe. She apologized for the interruption and left her card in case we needed anything. I stood on the porch and looked across at the Whitmore windows. I did not know whether I wanted a curtain to move or stay still. Both choices felt like a dare. A ripple in the upstairs window convinced me of nothing and everything, which is how uncertainty works when you do not want to accuse anyone of anything and you are tired of pretending the pattern is not a pattern. Ruth stopped by later that week with a clipboard and a direct way of speaking that I liked immediately. She said there had been a flurry of emails after the police visit and that she had shut it down because anonymous rumors were not board business. She did not say Greg's name, and she did not need to. "If you have issues, you come to me," she said, and I believed her, which made me feel safer than any porch light. The drone returned. The bags returned. I installed a doorbell camera and aimed it at the porch, but the next morning the lens showed nothing except a brief, dark blur, as if a fingertip had covered it mid-delivery. I began to wake early and pay attention, not because I wanted to become a detective, but because I wanted to protect my family without becoming the version of a neighbor I disliked. Greg's garage door opened at 6:15 every morning. He vacuumed his car mats, tightened his flag rope, and spoke to the mail carrier with a smile that sounded like a scorecard. He was always present, always perfect, always mildly performing the idea that standards are love. A month after we arrived, the lemon tree helped me find the first solid thing. I was checking the side gate at dusk when my flashlight caught the small shine of a lens inside a wooden birdhouse mounted at the top of our fence. A thin wire ran along the board and down into the mulch, where a weatherproof battery pack sat, tucked beneath bark. The camera faced our patio and yard, not its owner's driveway. My hands did not shake. Adrenaline made them steady in the way a surgeon's hands are steady when the room is very quiet. I took photos, unscrewed the tiny backplate, slid out the memory card, and replaced it with a blank one from an old camping camera. I put everything back exactly as I found it, because I could not afford to be sloppy. Late that night, when Lily slept and the dishwasher hummed, I put the card into my laptop. Dates and times appeared. The thumbnails showed our yard in every kind of light. Lily dancing through bubbles, Maya and me grilling burgers, me weeding under Sunny with an old hat pulled low. One clip caught the drone hovering like a curious bee, then backing away to the Whitmore side. Another clip, almost comically clear in reflection off our sliding door, showed a man's profile for a fraction of a second. Short hair, a tidy jaw, a baseball cap with a small flag on it. A different clip showed a gloved hand resting a blue bag on our porch rail. A tiny flag was stitched into the glove's cuff. I could not say the name out loud yet, but my body already believed it. I did not march across the street. I did not shout. It would have been satisfying for 5 minutes and foolish for 5 months. Instead, I copied the files to 3 different places, labeled the folders in simple terms my future self would understand, and slid the original card into a small anti-static sleeve, and then into a freezer bag behind the peas, because some part of me believes cold means preserved, and because no one looking for a fight opens frozen vegetables. The next day, I called Officer Park and asked what a careful person should do. She thanked me for documenting everything and advised me, gently but clearly, not to confront anyone. Patterns change when people feel seen, she said, which sounded like experience, not a warning. I called Ruth and asked in general terms how the HOA handled cameras pointed into neighbors' yards. With trouble in paperwork, she said, but also with a spine. She told me to print stills, blur our child, and bring them to her in person. My friend Deshawn, who is the rare combination of tech-smart and patient, helped me clone the memory card bit for bit and keep a simple chain of custody so we could show the timeline was real. He installed a second camera aimed at the birdhouse from our side. It would not replace the first, but it might capture any hand that tried to adjust it. Then he made coffee and sat with me while I wrote a short, clear summary for the police and the HOA, because the right words make heavy things easier to carry. We also filed a public records request for 911 calls from Maple Court for the past 2 months. When the spreadsheet arrived, it showed 8 calls related to our address, most from the same masked number, using the same phrases: child crying for extended period, strong odor of marijuana, suspicious male lingering. The suspicious male had been me, standing in my own driveway staring at a lemon tree, which would be funny if it didn't carry consequences. Officer Park confirmed she could link most of those calls to a single VoIP account ran from one home on our street. She did not say which one, but she did not need to. Ruth called a special board session. She also invited Carla Nguyen, a city code inspector with a calm voice and a neat notebook, to answer questions about camera placement, drones, sheds, fences, and drains. The room filled with lawn chairs and opinions. Carla explained that cameras are fine when they point at your own doors and driveways, but not fine when they aim at a neighbor's private yard. Drones cannot hover over someone else's property without permission. Sheds cannot sit on a property line. Drains cannot pour onto someone else's grass. She said all of this without drama, which made it sound like common sense rather than punishment. Greg stood and spoke about safety, standards, and what we expect from each other. But when the board asked about aim, only that one word, he finally admitted he had angled a camera over the fence to protect his family. He also admitted calling police when he heard or saw things that concerned him, and again used words like suspicious that say more about the speaker than the scene. Ruth, who believes in rules because she believes in fairness, reminded the room that bylaws are not weapons, and the board voted to censure Greg, remove him as vice chair, and require named complaints for future issues so neighbors would be accountable for their words. At the community's Curb Appeal Appreciation Night, where folding tables and paper plates do the work of diplomacy, the HOA presented a short, respectful slide deck on common courtesy. It showed, without faces and without blame, which camera angles keep peace, what the drone rules actually say, and a single reflective still from our sliding door, a rectangle of light with a timestamp, accompanied by a line that read, "What we watch also shows who we are." The room grew quiet in the way rooms do when people recognize something they have half known and can no longer pretend not to know. No one clapped. They did not need to. The message landed without applause. Meanwhile, the city addressed what belonged to the city. Carla cited Greg for an unpermitted shed that sat against the property line and a drainage system that sent water onto a neighbor's yard. Fines were issued with compliance deadlines. An insurance adjuster, alerted by the code notices, reviewed his approved security system discount and asked questions about cameras and permits. None of this was dramatic. All of it was heavy. Officer Park recommended a civil harassment order so the boundaries we needed would carry the force of the court. At the hearing, the judge listened to short, clear testimony, looked at documented timelines, and asked a few quiet questions. The order she granted did not humiliate anyone. It simply drew lines that would be enforced. No contact, no surveillance aimed at our property, no drones over our yard, no anonymous reports about our home unless there was a true emergency. The order would last 3 years, which sounded long, enough to breathe and short enough to live with hope. A week later, a for sale sign appeared in front of the Whitmore house. The listing used soft words like classic and neighbors who care, which felt more true now than when we arrived. On the day the moving truck came, Kim offered me a small nod that looked like relief and fatigue at the same time. Chase walked past us with his hood up and the posture of a boy who had spent years rehearsing someone else's idea of him. Greg carried his flag to the curb and did not look at me. I raised a hand because I believe in finishing with dignity, even when it is not returned. He kept his eyes on the truck, and that was his choice, not mine. We stayed and let the street become what it had promised to be. Lily learned to ride her bike without training wheels and circled Sunny with wide, delighted turns. We planted marigolds along the fence because they are bright and bugs dislike them, and the row made the yard look like it had its own small cheerleaders. The HOA's welcome baskets began to include a one-page courtesy guide with simple diagrams and a line at the top that Ruth wrote herself. We use rules to help, not to harm. Mr. Lopez started a Saturday weed and greet, where neighbors pulled dandelions and traded sunscreen. Jess and Priya hung a bigger pride flag. Nobody complained. Sometimes at night I stand at the sliding door and look out at the birdhouse. The camera I left inside now faces our own patio, which means its recordings are quiet. Spaghetti dinners, homework at the table, abandoned shoes under chairs, a child practicing the recorder with heroic confidence. The footage is boring in the best way, which is to say it looks like a life. If there is anything I want to hand you from this story, it is not a taste for revenge. It is a plan for dignity. Keep records without letting them become your identity. Find allies who believe rules are for safety and beauty, not for control. Use the law in daylight and accept that it moves slowly, because slow is how it becomes solid. Protect your home without becoming a copy of the person who hurt you. And remember that the perfect neighbor is not the person whose lawn looks like a magazine cover. It is the person who refuses to turn rules into a weapon, even when doing so would be easy, and even when anger would feel good. We rebuilt our mailbox one Sunday afternoon, following the instructions and laughing when I pretended not to need them. When we finished, we stepped back to admire the small, square thing we had installed with level hands, and it felt, because sometimes simple things feel like this, like cutting a ribbon on the life we had claimed. The porch light came on at its proper time. The street grew quiet without feeling watched, and the lemon tree moved a little in the evening air, as if it was pleased with how the neighborhood had remembered itself.